Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Age Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my must-own running backs for the 2021 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about 5 running backs in specific, as I'll give you guys my perspective and opinions as to how I think they're not only must-own guys, but guys I'm trying to draft in every single one of my leagues. I'll, of course, talk about the statistics that justify my reasoning and as to why I believe these players have extreme upside this upcoming season. And though the gentleman to my left is a guy that's potentially being drafted at the back end of the first round, I want to give everybody hope that whether or not you are selecting in that first 7 picks of the first round and getting the automatic RB1, I really do believe there's a lot of value to be at the back end of the first round, in the 3rd rounds, 5th rounds, at the running back position, even when we're getting to the point where the drop off in production is beginning to eliminate the running back position. But all in all, that is the objective for today's video. Now, before we begin, I of course want to thank you guys for the incredible support. We just recently surpassed 40,000 subscribers. I cannot thank you guys enough. I didn't expect to ever get here, but hey, the journey has taken us to our destination, but we're not stopping here. We're going to 50K. That's our next goal. And if you'd like to join us throughout this journey of the 2021 fantasy football season, then subscribe to the channel and help us get to that goal of 50,000 subscribers. Again, for the entirety of the 2021 season, I'll be making fantasy football content, whether it's this offseason preparing you for your upcoming drafts this upcoming weekend, or it's during the regular season, making sure that you're starting your lineups and winning your weekly matchups, whether it is with my running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback rankings during the week, my Sunday morning live streams, the waiver wire episode, my hidden gems for every single week, setting you up for success, and a couple more episodes that we'll be releasing this year for the first time. Very excited to announce those. But again, join us, support the channel, click that subscribe button down below. I do appreciate you guys. I can't believe we got to 40K. From the bottom of my heart, thank you guys. I really do appreciate it. The final thing I'd like to mention before we begin today's video is that my 2021 fantasy football draft guide is now available for those of you who are looking to get an edge on your league and trying to prepare for your upcoming drafts this weekend. You can find that in the description of the video via my Patreon or website for those of you who are interested in supporting there. Thank you very much in advance. All right. So if you're in the description of the video, there's also timestamps for the 5 players that I'm going to mention. Those will be taken care of. So if you'd like to go ahead and specifically listen to my thoughts and opinions and the stats that I'm going to present on today's episode for those players, then you can go down there. Outside of that, make sure you click the like button down below. Let me know what you guys think of the following 5 players that I'm going to mention down in the comment section. I'm curious as to who you guys think truly isn't one of the must-own or potentially must-draft running backs, because I truly do think all of these guys have incredible value this upcoming season. Now, I wanted to begin today's video by talking about Austin Ekeler, because as of the last couple seasons, I've been banging the drum for Austin Ekeler and the momentum that's been building behind him. I mean, when we go back to the 2019 season and think about what he was able to accomplish, finishing as the number 6 overall running back in a half PPR scoring format, averaging 16.44 fantasy points per game. Again, in the first 4 games of that season, he did not have Melvin Gordon there because Melvin Gordon was holding out because of the contract dispute. And even in those games, he was averaging 24 points practically. It was 23.75 in a half PPR scoring format. Now, after the 2019 season, how much success we saw out of Austin Ekeler, we thought to ourselves, with no Melvin Gordon in 2020, Melvin Gordon, of course, signed with the Denver Broncos, and Ekeler had the backfield all to himself. Why not go and invest in this guy? He was absolutely had all the momentum going in his direction, but unfortunately in 2020, he did sustain an injury that knocked him out of the Tampa Bay game and an extra 6 games after that. So in total, he only played 9 full games for the Los Angeles Chargers last season. But when you go ahead and take into account that in the 8 games that he did play with Justin Herbert as a starting quarterback last season, I mean, he was averaging an incredible amount of points, 15.90 in a half PPR or 19.15 fantasy points in a full PPR scoring format. With Justin Herbert, he had a total of 63 targets in those games, which on a per game basis is 7.87 targets per game. I mean, 8 targets per game for any player in the National Football League, even if you're a starting wide receiver, is incredible, much less a running back. Now, when you go ahead and look at the amount of routes run from Austin Ekeler, he ran 222 routes in the games that he played with Justin Herbert, targeted 63 times, like I mentioned. That's a 28.38% target percentage. I mean, the fact that more than 25% of the time when Austin Ekeler was running a route last season, Justin Herbert was looking in his direction and feeding him the ball. And of course, with Austin Ekeler's ability and skill in the passing game, he caught 81% of his total targets last season. All in all, fantastic. Now, when we go ahead and think about Austin Ekeler, of course, the injury was a concern and definitely did knock him out for a lot of time, and a lot of us got burnt from that. But once he came back last season, from weeks 12 through 17, the man was an absolute monster. He was the number 8 overall running back in a half PPR, averaging 14.1 fantasy points per game. And in a full PPR, where he was even better, averaging 17.18 fantasy points per game. Now, I understand you may be thinking, Austin Ekeler's a smaller running back. He's going to deal with injuries. To be honest, prior to last season, throughout his entire career prior to that, he had only missed 2 games ever due to injury. So it really was a rare instance to see a guy like this who has been generally healthy throughout his entire career on a singular play get not only a hamstring injury that was pretty intense, but also hyperextended knee. I mean, it was just bad luck in that certain instance. But now that we approach the 2021 fantasy football season, the questions are whether or not Austin Ekeler is a guy that you should be targeting in your respective drafts. Like I've mentioned already, 8 targets per game is where he is going to differentiate himself from every other prospect that you potentially see in the first couple rounds of your draft, even if they are receiving options. The ability to have a starting running back on a respective team commands so much respect in the passing game. And I understand many people may be thinking, yes, Coach Anthony Lynn, the former head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, his offense with the Chargers while he was there had been 100% running back based. They had given their running backs the most opportunities since 2016 and the most total targets. So I understand there was definitely going to be a little bit of a shift, but they brought in Joe Lombardi, the former offensive quarterbacks coach of the New Orleans Saints. I mean, if we look back at what the New Orleans Saints have done in the last 8 years since Joe Lombardi's been there, I know he hasn't been the offensive play caller, but he has certainly learned from Sean Payton and seen that not only does Sean Payton want to feed Alvin Kamara the ball, but Alvin Kamara has accomplished 81 plus receptions since 2017, 4 consecutive years. Prior to that, Pierre Thomas, Darren Sproles, Reggie Bush, they've always wanted to feed their running backs, and I think Joe Lombardi is going to bring that into this Los Angeles Chargers organization and kind of help Austin Ekeler get to that next level once again. If the Chargers offense picks up exactly where they left off last season, and with, of course, Austin Ekeler from weeks 12 through 17 after returning from his injury, having himself a lot of success, I think he's going to once again see himself 8 targets per game. And if he's able to do so in a 16-game season, again, because we're not playing in that 17th game, that'll be a game that we're not worried about. But in the 16 weeks that you have a potential of winning a 2021 fantasy football championship, he could end up seeing over, 128 targets. If, in fact, with the 81% catch rate that he proved last year, gets 130 some odd targets, he's going to get over 100 receptions. And in a full PPR scoring format, not only is the ability to get 100 receptions with whatever yardage comes from it, maybe 800 yards, a couple touchdowns, he's going to get the ability to run the ball on a consistent basis because there isn't a Kalen Ballage in this backfield anymore. I mean, that's who they replaced him with last year because they had so many injuries in that backfield. But Joshua Kelly, Justin Jackson, these are not guys that are going to be taking the groundwork away from Austin Ekeler. And though Austin Ekeler may not be a Derrick Henry-esque running back who's going to sit on the 2-yard line and bash into the end zone and score 18 plus touchdowns in a singular season, he is going to be a guy that does score. In the last 2 seasons, he scored 10 of his 14 touchdowns from within the red zone and 4 of those touchdowns from within the 5-yard line. So again, even though he is a smaller statured running back, we have to take into account that even when they're down there, they don't have to hand him off the ball. They can give him a ball on a swing pass and get him open. There's multiple ways to be able to feed Austin Ekeler. On top of that, besides the fact that they've extremely improved their offensive line this year. Again, I've talked about it. You brought in Slater the first round. He's going to be playing their left tackle, of course, keeping their young star quarterback healthy. You brought in Corey Linley, one of the best offensive centers in the National Football League, formerly of the Green Bay Packers. I think Brian Bulaga, again, another offensive tackle from the Green Bay Packers, who was with the Chargers last year, obviously dealt with a lot of injuries. He's going to be fully healthy this year. I think this is an incredibly improved offensive line, of course. I think the sky's the limit for this team, and I think Austin Ekeler is going to have himself a great opportunity to take advantage of it. On top of the fact he has the 6th easiest schedule amongst all running backs in the National Football League this upcoming season, and in a full PPR scoring format, no joke, he's probably my number 7 overall prospect and should be drafted as such. As soon as you get there, take him. The next must-own running back I wanted to talk about today is Najee Harris, and this is another player that is on the fringe as to whether or not you're going to be selecting him at the back end of the first round or even in the beginning of the second round of your respective 2021 fantasy football drafts. Now, the reason I wanted to mention Najee Harris is because you guys, I do this. For those of you who have been around the channel, I always grab a singular rookie running back and I don't stop. I keep telling you guys to take them. Last year it was Jonathan Taylor in the 3rd round and he panned out, luckily for me. But Najee Harris is definitely that guy this upcoming season. Not only is he going into an offense that has no other running backs that are going to impede in his overall opportunity, unlike the situation that Jonathan Taylor had. He was going into a backfield with already established Marlon Mack and Nyheim Hines, but got lucky with the injury. This upcoming season, you get Najee Harris going into a backfield with Benny Snell and Kalen Ballage, guys that really haven't done anything in their National Football League careers. And we get an Alabama running back that is coming off of a national championship victory that is going into an organization that desperately needs to establish the run once again. Now, when we look at the opportunity that is going to be presented in front of Najee Harris and the skill that he can accompany with that, it's just going to be automatic success in my eyes. Of course, look, when we go back and look at the stats that he put up in Alabama, I'm not even worried about the 1,200 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns, 1,400 rushing yards, 26 touchdowns. Those don't bother me because when I look at his stature, his speed, I mean, what is he, 6'2", 230 pounds? This guy is an absolute machine. But besides the opportunity and the effectiveness on the ground, what really separates you from talent in the National Football League and in fantasy football is your ability to catch the ball. There's a reason why we mention Austin Ekeler, because he has an opportunity to catch over 100 receptions this year, and Najee Harris is going to be the full-time starter for this team, 3-down back, and can certainly get a lot of work in the passing game, and has proven already at Alabama that he is a accomplished receiving option. In fact, in the last 2 seasons at Alabama, he totaled exactly 70 receptions for over 700 receiving yards and 11 receiving touchdowns. I haven't seen that out of a running back in college in a very long time, especially at Alabama. They're always so effective at running the ball, but he is such a dynamic running back that you can find him out in the flat. He ends up hurdling dudes on the sidelines and making some plays. And I think now that you get him into the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, the comparisons start to begin. Is he the next Le'Veon Bell? Because when we look at what Le'Veon Bell was able to accomplish in 2014, 16, and 17, throughout that span of time, Le'Veon Bell was getting about 393 total touches per season, which is 92.68% of the entire Pittsburgh Steelers backfield of opportunity. Again, unimpeded opportunity, touching the ball nearly 93% of total running back targets and total attempts on the ground. And that volume of opportunity certainly led to Le'Veon Bell finding a lot of success, especially in fantasy football. I mean, he was a number 4 or greater overall running back in those 3 seasons, 14, 16, and 17, because the opportunity was there, the touchdowns accompanied it, and he continued to find success. Now, in the absence of Le'Veon Bell, since 2018 to 2020, of course, the amount of opportunities for the running back position has declined for the Pittsburgh Steelers on a per season average. They're only giving their running backs about 419 total opportunities per season, which in comparison to when Le'Veon Bell was there was about 474. They've certainly seen a little bit of a dip. But regardless of the absence of Le'Veon Bell from this starting lineup, the Pittsburgh Steelers were still able to find a lot of success in the coming years with their starting running back, James Conner. Between 2018 to 2020, James Conner only played 36 games for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Throughout that time, he averaged 14.67 fantasy points per game, pretty good overall production, while averaging 17.33 touches per game. Now, in the 27 games that he was given the ball 14 or more times, the guy averaged 17.12 fantasy points and a half PPR. And in the 11 games in which he was given the ball 20 or more times, averaged 24.25 fantasy points per game. He scored 15 touchdowns from within the 5-yard line and 26 total touchdowns in the 36 games in his career with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So again, a lot of success can be found. But the thing that I think separates even James Conner from Najee Harris, and why I think Najee Harris even gets more of the ability or potential upside, is the passing game. He is far more similar to Le'Veon Bell, and though Le'Veon Bell looks like a natural receiving option, I think Najee Harris has the ability to catch the ball 50 or more times this upcoming season. And despite the fact that they have 3 stud wide receivers and 2 tight ends, and the ball is going to be thrown 630 plus times, I still think Najee Harris is going to be a huge part of this receiving game for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2021. And though we all want to go ahead and compare Le'Veon Bell to Najee Harris and whether or not he can fill into that mold, I think, yes, there's a potential in which you could say Najee Harris is the next Le'Veon Bell. But in my opinion, the way I see it, Najee Harris is the first Najee Harris. And he's going to prove to every single one of us that he is an incredible running back and that we've all made mistakes by only letting him get to the back end of the first round or second round in some of our drafts instead of taking him earlier. So with that said, okay, I know that the next argument that many of you are going to potentially kind of talk about in the comment section, and you can let me know, is yes, the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line is not great. They've replaced a lot of those players, and they've lost a lot of talent up front with, of course, Pouncey retiring. They've lost, a Castro, Foster in years past, Villanueva. I mean, they've lost a lot of talent up there. And you may be thinking, Andrew, I can't trust Najee Harris, regardless of whether or not he has the easiest strength of schedule amongst all running backs this upcoming season. Wink, wink. That's going to make a big difference. But I just can't trust him because of the offensive line. Listen, there have been running backs in years past that have become RB1s regardless of their offensive line. Let's think about Saquon Barkley. You think Saquon Barkley's ever had a good offensive line in his career? Absolutely has not. What do you think about James Robinson or Leonard Fournette, in fact, in the last 2 seasons? You think the Jacksonville Jaguars have a good offensive line? No. But what these dudes have, more than just about anyone in the National Football League, is unimpeded opportunity of play. They were getting 80+% of their team's running back opportunities when they were active and healthy. When you're touching the ball that many times, 20+ touches a game, and you're a workhorse running back, you're an unstoppable force. And it's almost a guarantee that you're going to be an RB1. I think the touchdowns, the receiving game, the opportunity is all going to be there for Najee Harris. And this is why he's a guy that I'm absolutely trying to grab in every single one of my leagues this upcoming season. We move on to the next running back I want to mention. A running back that, though he's not at the back end of the first round like Ekeler and Najee Harris, is a guy that still finished within the RB1 category, but has kind of fell this offseason as we approach our 2021 fantasy football drafts because of what the circumstances are in the Chicago Bears offense and with David Montgomery. But regardless, finishes the number 4 overall guy in a half PPR and full PPR scoring format. You know, that's pretty good numbers. And like I just mentioned with Najee Harris, the reason why a running back like David Montgomery can do this is because unimpeded opportunity. The guy touched the ball 93.2% of the time in terms of the entire Bears backfield opportunities to running backs. He led the entire National Football League in terms of total percentage of your team's opportunities out of the backfield, and that's the highest number I've seen in just the past 3 seasons while going ahead and tracking that statistic. So of course, David Montgomery given incredible opportunity. In the 15 games he played, averaged 15.87 fantasy points per game in a half PPR and 17.65 fantasy points per game in a full PPR. When we just isolate the opportunity that he saw in 2020 and see how much he was able to succeed there, it's incredible. But he's been able to do that throughout his entire career when given opportunity. In the first 2 seasons of his career, 2019 and 2020, when David Montgomery's been given 16 or more touches per game, he's averaged 15.15 fantasy points per game in a half PPR and 16.65 fantasy points per game in a full PPR. That's 21 of his 31 total games played. So of course he's proven, give me the ball and I'm going to succeed. But the reason why he was able to do this, of course, was Tariq Cohen. But Tariq Cohen isn't going to be coming back right away this upcoming season. Of course, sustained an ACL injury that knocked him out of last season, which gave David Montgomery the ability to go from only catching the ball 25 times in his rookie year to 54 times in his sophomore season. And going into 2021, Tariq Cohen is on the physically unable to perform list. So at very earliest, he'll be coming back in week 7. And by the time he comes back, he may not be a full go. And I know many of you may be worried Damian Williams is in this backfield. He's coming back and he's going to potentially take away targets or receptions or rushing attempt. I don't see that as an issue because let's not forget Cordero Patterson, who is an actual receiver, played running back for this team last season. Even in the game that, David Montgomery missed, Cordero Patterson was the starting running back for this team. So even there, with a receiver in the backfield, David Montgomery was getting all the receptions. Now, besides Tariq Cohen's absence affecting the potential of David Montgomery, of course, giving him more opportunity, going into the 2020 season, I had mentioned in the offseason prior that David Montgomery has the easiest strength of schedule amongst all running backs in the NFL. And I'm here to announce once again, he has the 5th easiest overall schedule for running backs going into the 2021 season. Let's look at the first 7 games of the season. After this, of course, Tariq Cohen will return. But, at what capacity, we don't know. And at that point, are they going to give Tariq Cohen a lot of those receptions, or are they going to continue to work with David Montgomery? I think David Montgomery continues to see those targets. But regardless, to start the season, you get the LA Rams on Sunday Night Football. Unfortunately, I'm not really concerned about that game because David Montgomery's played against the Los Angeles Rams and he hasn't done well in his career. But let's say he scores an early touchdown, fine. This following 5 games are a cakewalk. Cincinnati, Cleveland, Detroit, Las Vegas, Green Bay. I expect David Montgomery to be scoring 16 plus points a week against those teams. And when he builds that momentum and shows everyone he is literally the lead back of this team, even when Tariq Cohen returns, there's no turning the ball back to Tariq Cohen. We're giving David Montgomery the full work, and he's going to get the receptions. Because as soon as teams see Tariq Cohen on the field, what do you think they're going to think? Oh, they're passing the ball. They're not going to hand that man the ball. He was averaging 3 yards per carry the last time we saw him. So again, in my opinion, David Montgomery is a great option. And as soon as you get Justin Fields into this offense, I mean, oh my gosh, it just becomes that much more dynamic. When you have to keep the backside defensive end honest when you're handing off the ball because of the potential of a keep from Justin Fields, it makes it so where there's that many more lanes for David Montgomery to run through. I think this offense is poised for a good season if, in fact, Justin Fields could take over it. But David Montgomery is a absolute stud, in my opinion, and I think he's going to be able to deliver for many of us this upcoming season. Moving on to our next running back of choice here, it's Chris Carson. I've talked about Chris Carson a lot because I love Chris Carson. I mean, really, he has just been one of the more consistent running backs in the National Football League. In the last 3 seasons and a half PPR, he scored and become the number 17, number 11, and number 15 overall running backs while dealing with injuries, yes. But since taking over the job in 2018, he's averaged 15.45 fantasy points per game in the 35 games as the starting running back of the Seattle Seahawks, while averaging 3.38 yards per carry after contact. I mean, this is a bruiser back, and a lot of people didn't expect Chris Carson to be the starting running back of the Seattle Seahawks because let's not forget they drafted Rashad Penny to be that, but Chris Carson was not giving the job away. In his time as a starting running back of this team, the man has averaged 20.12 touches per game. That's workhorse caliber. 98.8 total yards per game and 0.77 touchdowns per game. In 77.14% of the games that he's played, he's at least had over 10 fantasy points. He has been a consistent running back. And I mean, going back to last season in 2020, he still had great numbers in the 11 games in which he was a full healthy starter, averaging 14.97 fantasy points per game. And even when he started the season, they weren't giving him a lot of rushing attempts because he was coming off of that hip injury that he had to deal with the season prior. And eventually, we just realized, wow, he's just a capable receiver. Not only is he a great runner, I mean, even in fact, last season was averaging 3.73 targets per game and 3 receptions per game on a 16-game basis. We got ourselves almost 50 receptions and 60 some odd targets. We don't often see that in the National Football League, much less from a team that wants to run the ball even more this upcoming season. We've heard Pete Carroll bang the drum. We are running the ball more regardless of the offensive coordinator change. I don't know how much to believe them, but of course they've ran the ball significantly less than they have in the past. In 2018, when Chris Carson was the initial starter of this team, the total rushing attempts from the offense were 451 from the running back position. Just this past season, we only saw the offense run the ball with their respective running backs 316 times. So that's 135 total rushing attempts drop. If those numbers go back up for Chris Carson, ooh, baby. I mean, we got even more opportunity going in his direction. So regardless, I think Chris Carson, already in an offense that wants to give him the ball, and he has established himself as the RB1 here for the last 3 consecutive seasons, is going to find a lot of success. But even in his absence, you may be thinking, oh, with Chris Carson probably out, the Seahawks, their offense isn't great. To be honest, I think it's more of a scheme thing rather than a talent thing. Yes, Chris Carson's great, but last season kind of proved me to think, whoever the starting running back of the Seattle Seahawks is really going to find value. In specific, Chris Carson had 11 starts last season, Carlos Hyde 2, DJ Dallas 2, Alex Collins 1. In that span of time, whoever was the starting running back of the Seattle Seahawks averaged 14.92 fantasy points per game in the 16 games they played. And in fact, when I went ahead and I found the starters and how many targets and receptions they had, they pretty much all totaled 60 targets and 49 receptions, which was the exact average that Chris Carson was on pace for in his 11 games. So regardless of who you're putting in this offense, in this starting position, they're going to find success. And I think it's going to be Chris Carson this year, but keep an eye on Rashad Penny. You're going to have to potentially cuff him. Keep an eye on that. I'm telling you, could find a lot of success there. The last couple things I want to mention in regards to Chris Carson is, of course, when you have Russell Wilson, he has the ability to run the ball. It continues to open up, potential gaps for your offense. You're going to get an offense in which they're potentially going to throw the ball more, which will alleviate some of the pressure off of Chris Carson, but it's not going to stop the touchdowns. Last season alone, Tyler Lockett had, 6 receiving touchdowns from within the 5-yard line. Where do you think those touchdowns are going to go? They're going to go in the direction of Chris Carson. He's going to find a lot of success. He no longer has Carlos Hyde breathing down his neck, taking touches, taking touchdowns, and attempts away. This offensive line has, of course, helped him out a lot. The left side, specifically with Dwayne Brown, Damian Lewis, when he has ran the ball to their side, the left C and B gaps, he's averaged 5.3 yards per carry, and they're 2 of the best run-blocking offensive guards and tackles in the National Football League. There's a lot of potential here. And I think Carson is going to be able to deliver on it this upcoming season, and that's why he's one of my must-own running backs. The last guy I want to mention on today's video Gus the Bus Edwards. I haven't talked about J.K. Dobbins' injury because, man, I was upset to hear it. He should not have been playing in that final preseason game. There's a reason why the team like the Los Angeles Chargers didn't play Herbert, Ekeler, and or Keenan Allen throughout the entire preseason, because why are you going to risk it? Why risk it? But I understand. To each their own. Gus Edwards is our next running back that we have to talk about now, because he immediately jumps into the conversation of being a top 24 running back in the absence of J.K. Dobbins. But not only is he a top 24 running back, I think he's even greater than that, because the potential, the opportunity, and what he has done in his career thus far for the Baltimore Ravens has proven that he is a capable running back and can easily take it to the next level. Now, since 2018, Week 11, when Lamar Jackson became the starter of this offense, so did Gus Edwards. He became the starter in the last back end of the season, weeks 11 through 17 of the 2018 season. Now, in that time, since then, Gus Edwards has averaged 5.23 yards per carry. I mean, an insane number. Has averaged 10.67 touches per game. I know it's not been the greatest because, again, he lost his job to Mark Ingram in 2019 and then eventually to J.K. Dobbins in 2020. Has kind of played the second running back fiddle for the last couple of years. But regardless, in the games that he's been given 10 or more touches in his career, he's averaged 10.02 fantasy points per game. That's 18 of his total games since, of course, becoming the starter in Week 11 of the 2018 season. Now, if I just isolate the 10 total contests that Gus Edwards has been the starter for this team over the last 3 years, he's averaged 11.6 fantasy points per game. In 5 of those 10 games has totaled over 100 yards, and in 4 of those games scored at least 1 touchdown. In 2020, he was one of the most effective running backs in the entire National Football League with 0.752 fantasy points per attempt and 1.338 fantasy points per target. Of course, the overall effectiveness has been there. Again, he's averaged over 5 yards per carry, so I mean, of course, every time he's given the ball, the guy is going to put up points. But the question is, what can we potentially see of him in 2021 without J.K. Dobbins in this backfield, without Mark Ingram there? Yes, Lamar Jackson is going to touch the ball. In fact, the Ravens, since Lamar Jackson has taken over in 2018, have been a team that has ran the ball the most amongst all teams in the National Football League, even breaking records in 2019 for the most rushing attempts in National Football League history by a singular team. Imagine that. So when we think about, okay, we know Lamar Jackson is going to run the ball. How many times is he going to run the ball? I mean, when we look at 2020, the team as a whole ran the ball 555 times. Lamar Jackson accounted for 159 of those rushing attempts. In the last 2 seasons, 159, 174 rushing attempts. Let's say, for example, to be safe, he runs the ball 170 times. Lamar Jackson is going to run the ball 10 plus times per game. Okay, let's say that's, the contingency for now. There are so many more carries to be had in this backfield. I think there is a very possible and strong ability for Gus Edwards to touch the ball 240 to 250 times out of this backfield, which of course we haven't seen from Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram only touched the ball, I think it was 226 total times in that year where he was an RB1. But what accompanied his performance was 15 touchdowns, 10 on the ground, 5 through the air, which is insane to me. I think there's a potential in which you get into this offense, you see that there's no J.K. Dobbins, who, when J.K. Dobbins was the starter last season from weeks 11 through 17, was averaging 16.7 fantasy points per game and a half PPR. He was averaging 13.336 touches per game, was averaging over 6 yards per carry, had 6 games of consecutive rushing touchdown or more. I mean, how much more could we ask from the starting running back of the Baltimore Ravens over the last 2 years? So now that we plug in Gus Edwards, I think there's a lot of potential. If he's going to run the ball at the effectiveness that he has, 5.23 yards per carry, or at least over 5. I mean, Mark Ingram was over 5 yards per carry. So is J.K. Dobbins. So is Gus Edwards. So whoever the running back is here is going to succeed. So if you give him 240 carries, we're surpassing 1,000 yards. The Ravens have unfortunately targeted their running backs the least amongst all teams in the last 2 years. Only, I think, 101 times in the past 2 seasons. Let's say, for example, he catches the ball 15 times this season. Great. We're happy with it. We'll take that because we know that the touchdowns are going to be there. The games in which, of course, Lamar Jackson scores, one of his 7 touchdowns, of course, it's going to hurt Gus Edwards. But he's going to score a lot of touchdowns. I'm thinking that he can get to the double-digit touchdown range. And yes, in a full PPR, he's a significantly less valuable overall prospect. I really do believe that Gus Edwards, because of the fact that this offense in the last 3 seasons since Lamar Jackson has taken over, has given their running backs the 8th most opportunities in terms of rushing attempts, 1,123. I mean, you can't ask for anything more. It's just a perfect scheme scenario. And luckily for Gus Edwards, he's in a position in which he can succeed. Assuming they bring nobody in, I do believe that there is potential value for a guy like Tyson Williams behind him. Gus Edwards should be the workhorse back of this team, touching the ball hopefully 13 or more times per game, getting those touchdowns, getting the yardage, getting a couple sprinkles of targets. He's going to find himself in a very good position because of how effective he's been in his career. And on an expanded basis, going from only averaging about 130 to 140 touches per season, getting that extra 100, I think his body is ready for it, and I think he's ready to take over. Those are my 5 must-own running backs going into the 2021 fantasy football season and into your draft. Let me know down below in the comment section, do you guys believe these guys are must-own, or who do you suggest is a must-own running back this upcoming season? Thank you, everybody, for watching. Again, join us on the journey as we get to 50,000 subscribers. Click that subscribe button. Thank you very much. And click that like button down below if you enjoyed today's video. Can't thank you guys enough for the incredible support as of late. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.